Welcome everybody to the Captain Spot. I'm your host Justin Freeman, 6 foot 1 inches, 275 pounds, fantasy knowledge, and it's Monday Night Football. So as always, we're right here on the Mayo Media Network. Make sure you like the video, click subscribe if you haven't already. We're going to be talking Steelers at Bengals. This one looks like a runaway. There's a lot of turmoil going on in Cincinnati right now. Of course, they lost Joe Burrow earlier this season. They'll be without Brandon Allen in this game at the quarterback position. Down to third string option, Ryan Finley. We've got a little bit of tape on Ryan Finley. We know how he likes to play. So we'll dive right into it here, where we're talking about a game with a 40-point total. I mean, just abysmal. Steelers favored by 14.5. Now, you might think like, well, why would I even bother playing a showdown slate that looks as lopsided as this? And let me tell you, you couldn't ask for a better showdown slate if you're interested in making a lot of money, because, and I don't claim to have all the answers right here, but this is a good situation for us to try really unique strategies, because here's what happens. Like, let's think about a really high scoring, high flying type of game. You know, a game that's going to project out with a Vegas total of 55 points or something like that. Then we know like the usual suspects are going to be really heavily involved. Like if it's a Chiefs game, we know there's going to be Patrick Mahomes, we know Travis Kelce, we know Tyreek Hill, and they're going to come and get their points in bunches, and they're going to be in the winning lineup. But when the score, you know, the projected score in this game, 40 points, I mean, we could be talking about a game, you know, if we think about the range of outcomes of a 40-point Vegas total, like where there's some ranges of outcomes that's like a 10-7 ball game. And in which case, you know, we could be talking about some really off-the-wall plays that end up in the winning lineups. It's going to be important for us to go deep, make sure we understand these depth charts, through and through, and make sure we got the prices down pat and that we know what we're talking about, because this should be a fun opportunity for us to get creative. Like, and here's what I mean, because let's think about that Chiefs slate we talked about, and let's just say in that slate, let's say it just so happens that Deion Yelder, the backup tight end, scores a touchdown. It's his only catch of the game. It's a 10-yard touchdown. So he's got the 1 point for the catch, the 6 points for the touchdown, and the 1 point for the 10 yards. That's 8 points. Like if you got 8 points for a guy who cost you $200, you'd be like, heck yeah, this is the option. This is the way. However, like the odds of him actually showing up in a winning lineup in a game that goes bananas like that, probably not that high, because you're going to need more raw points in your lineups. But in this type of situation, we can leave a crap ton of money on the table, because if that same situation hits, and, you know, we're talking Steelers, Bengals here, like let's say it's a Vance McDonald touchdown, Eric Ebron's back up at tight end. Now, all of a sudden, that score can hold. It'll hold all game long in a game where there's not a whole lot of fantasy points being scored. So overall, that's how we should be thinking about approaching this game. It's a unique situation. We've got a backup quarterback and a huge spread. You know, the Steelers should be absolutely dog walking this game, so we're going to be getting into sort of backup type options for them. And then the Bengals should be, you know, forced to throw all game long. So let's take a look at how these guys have been used over the last several weeks, starting with the Bengals side of the football. They'll get Ryan Finley. Ryan Finley will cost you $8,000 this week. He got 10% of the snaps last week after Brandon Allen went down. But overall, here's the story on Ryan Finley, is that he's an athletic quarterback, likes to run, and is just really a subpar passer. Like, he'll make Brandon Allen look like a good passer. So we want to downgrade the Bengals pass catchers in this game in terms of an efficiency standpoint. However, what we are going to boost them on is volume, because in a game where they're projected to lose by 2 touchdowns, we know the pass attempts are going to be there for the Bengals. So the question is, can Ryan Finley pay himself off at $8,000? Yeah, I think it's possible he gets there with a rushing touchdown. Honestly, if they can get the ball into the red zone, I think that'd be his preferred mode of converting, is doing it with his legs. So I think you can certainly consider him in that regard. But if you're looking for a way to fade some of the chalk options, now I don't think Ryan Finley is going to be hyper chalk across the industry, but at $8,000, you could certainly come off of him and go to, you know, his pass catchers in this offense and play the, like, what if Ryan Finley does not throw a passing touchdown game? Then what could happen? You know, we're probably talking about a game where Tyler Boyd or T. Higgins and maybe even A.J. Green has, you know, a multiple catch night. We're talking like a 8 catch for, hopefully you could get 100, but let's just say it was 8 for 80 and no touchdowns. Well, that's 16 fantasy points. That's probably good enough to get into a winning lineup on a low-scoring slate like this. So that's just sort of mentally where we want to get to is, how can, and in that situation, Finley does not pay off, but Boyd does in that particular situation. And, getting into the running back rotation, it's really become a three-man rotation there with Gio Bernard, Samaje Perine, and Travion Williams. Bernard 5,600, Perine 1,400, Travion 1,200. Now, I would say typically in DFS classic formats, I don't want to try to be a week early on a guy. I don't want to, jump the gun on a guy. However, in Showdown, it makes a lot of sense to try to jump the gun and be early on somebody because the risk reward is there. It's available to you. There's no other better options to choose from another game on the slate. So this is a great opportunity for us to jump all over Travion Williams. So Travion's a guy that this team needs to figure out what they have in him. It'll only cost you, $1,200 to get Travion into your lineup. He played 38% of the snaps last week. Granted, it was getting a little bit ugly out there. Got 40% of the team's rush attempts. And so I think you could see him involved. He also got 8% of the team's targets. So that's a good baseline if we think that can be, something projectable moving forward. Now, ordinarily, if this were week 7, I would say, no, that was probably just a bad game script thing. Forget about Travion Williams. They'll go back to Gio this week. But they seem to just be, tired of Gio at this point. He's been super unproductive as a player for them so far this year with Joe Mixon out. And overall, they just want to figure out what they've got. They have literally nothing to play for in Cincinnati other than trying guys out on the roster. Here we are. It's week 15. It's time to find out if Travion Williams can play football. So at $1,200, really interested in his role. He could be the guy that could get some short yardage work at the goal line. He could be a guy that can help you out a little bit in the passing game. So overall, I like that role. I'm not interested in Samaje Perine, just too much of a one-dimensional player for me to take much interest in. And then Gio at 5,600. I think there's too many pass to failure there for Gio for me. Looking at the receivers there, we talked about T. Higgins, 6,800, Tyler Boyd, 8,400. Maybe there's just a little bit too much of a pricing gap there. However, this is Showdown, and this is kind of a great opportunity to say, let's say you built a lineup and you had exactly $8,600 left or $9,000 left, and $8,400, but you could afford either of those two guys that you wanted to. 99% of people, when they get to that spot of their lineup, are going to choose Tyler Boyd, the more expensive player. I've got the cash. I can afford the more expensive guy, throw the more expensive guy in the lineup. However, just flip that on its head when we're talking about Showdown because that's a great way to create unique leverage by going with T. Higgins. So $6,800 there in that game, that's $1,600 savings. So you'd be leaving $1,600 cap on the table at a minimum in that type of one-off situation. Just a good way to think about approaching Showdown in general, because I don't think there's a ton differentiating T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Their snap counts are very similar. Their target rates are very similar. Tyler Boyd probably just a tad bit more consistent in catching football, getting open. But, we're talking about a backup quarterback. I think you just throw, all that other stuff out the window. This is going to be a tough defensive matchup for them against Pittsburgh, but we're banking on volume. Matter of fact, you could throw both those guys in the same lineup. Not a problem. AJ Green, a guy who bounced back, had a good week last week on only 18% of the targets. He is definitely a notch below the other two in terms of projectable target volume. However, one game sample sizes, do with that what you will. Now, if we're digging a little bit further down the depth chart at some guys who have also played in this offense here recently, Mike Thomas, Alex Erickson, and Stanley Morgan were the three guys who did get a little bit of run late in that game. And so, if we're looking at what those guys have also done recently, Mike Thomas and Alex Erickson do have a little bit of a track record. Mike Thomas had started to develop a role in this offense, and at $200, you can certainly entertain the idea of throwing him in there. Alex Erickson probably offers a little bit less of a ceiling than Mike Thomas does, so just keep that in mind. But at the tight end position, it's Drew Sample who is the featured tight end. Cethan Carter plays just a little bit but doesn't get any targets. And we talked about just sort of backup type players that could get a little bit of love. I would not go that deep. Keep it at Drew Sample. He only cost you $4,200. He could pay off with. You're really hoping for a touchdown with Drew Sample because the target volume not strong enough. For him to pay off on targets and catches alone. You need a big play, a scoring event type situation. Now, on the Pittsburgh side of the football, Ben Roethlisberger, 11-8. Certainly have to think he'll be worth it. The only sort of fear with Ben Roethlisberger is this game gets so out of hand early that he's not involved for 4 quarters, but I don't think you're going to need him to be. If he can get you at least 1 touchdown and 200 yards passing, then I think you're well on your way to being able to piece together the winning lineup there, because he's probably going to be contributing in a handful of other ways. So, 1 touchdown, a passing touchdown, and 200 yards, that's a dozen fantasy points. That's not great. And we would hope for more for a guy priced at 11-8, but it might be exactly what you need in a low-scoring type of game. Looking at the running back position, 6,600 for James Conner. You'll see they've priced up Benny Snell at 6,200. Now, James Conner banged up and is questionable here for this game, so we may be looking at a full game of Benny Snell workload. However, I think it seems like Conner is trending towards playing for right now, so we will assume that for right now. I think the question is, does Conner even benefit from a truly positive game script situation? We've seen the Steelers win big in the past, and we haven't seen huge workloads follow James Conner. And he hasn't played very well over the second half of the season. Obviously, he's had COVID thrown in there. There's been a number of obstacles there for James Conner. But overall, there's just so many thorns in James Conner's side. You've got Benny Snell right there. You've got Jalen Samuels, who's starting to get a lot of snaps. You've got Anthony McFarland, who's always out there. The list goes on with guys who can go out there and just take some snaps away and take opportunities away and just sort of chip away at him from a bunch of different angles. So I hate the fact that James Conner doesn't have a hang your hat type of role in this offense. But at 6,600, you could certainly play he scores a touchdown and he's a big part of the reason they get out to a big lead game. Now, he doesn't have to play for all 4 quarters. He doesn't need a positive game script situation throughout the course of the game for him to pay off at that price point. But I think you could certainly also consider playing multiple Steeler running backs from the same team, in the same game, in the same lineup. I think that's a very creative way to get unique. You won't be duplicating a lot of other lineups that way. And because most people don't feel comfortable, with the negative correlation there, but the positive correlation that ties it all together is the fact that the game script is so friendly towards Pittsburgh. Looking at the receiving options, again, proceed with caution because we don't expect a ton of volume, but we do expect efficiency, at least first half efficiency here for the Steelers. Juju's priced at $10K. Deontay Johnson, $10,200. Chase Claypool, $8,600. Those guys make up at least what we thought was the core 3 wide receiver set. But do not forget about James Washington, $4,400. The dude played 81% of the snaps last week. He immediately filled in for Deontay Johnson, who was benched at halftime in that game for drops. And that's been a problem with Deontay Johnson for several games now. I don't know if they will throw him right back out there and say, listen, we know you're one of our 3 best receivers. Go catch the football and extend that leash a little bit more. Or if we'll just see James Washington have earned a role over Deontay Johnson at this point. But, it isn't just Deontay Johnson who loses when James Washington's on the field. It's also Chase Claypool. And so the real big winner here is Juju Smith-Schuster, the guy who is priced at $10K this week and is the most reliable guy in terms of targets, success, efficiency in this offense. Now, so you got big question marks surrounding playing time on the other 3 guys, and you really would like those guys to be out there a lot. So to me, I think Juju makes a lot of sense to focus on. Obviously, we know the big plays are there for Claypool. We know if Deontay Johnson gets a full multitude of snaps, he's going to get looks. But overall, there's a lot of uncertainty. James Washington is a great way to get a piece of that action as well. Won't cost you a ton. Ray McLeod, $200. Honestly, I like playing Ray from time to time, but his snaps have gone way down here recently. I don't think you can really get there. Now, the tight end position, Eric Ebron, $6,400. Vance McDonald, $1K. Now, what is Vance McDonald doing? It's not a ton. In 4 of the last, 4 of the last 5 games has not drawn a target. That's problematic if you're trying to play a guy like Vance McDonald. But if the Steelers get up early, maybe they take Ebron off the field, Vance could fill in as well. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that Eric Ebron has also struggled with drops. Could the team possibly pull him off the field and give him a quick hook if he were to drop another pass or 2 early in this game? It's just something to consider. It's an angle. I certainly wouldn't recommend playing Vance as a standalone product. However, if we're trying to get unique, think of weird ways this game can unfold, that would be a couple options there for you. So overall, let's hop into our simulations here this week to see who is our favorite captain of the week. It looks like it's Ben Roethlisberger. We talked about this in the last Island game where Ben was a part of, and it's the fact that Ben can get there as captain, which is a little bit unconventional for quarterbacks because he spreads the ball around so much. He does not have a keyed-in favorite target. He can pay off with multiple touchdowns to multiple players, but also James Conner right there, Juju Smith-Schuster as well, then T. Higgins, Chase Claypool, and Steelers D. Let's hop on over to our flex appearances where it is Ben Roethlisberger, and usually this is where we see the other quarterback listed and where it would be Ryan Finley, but we'll see Ryan Finley is the fourth place option for flex, which is unusual for a quarterback. Usually we see both quarterbacks as the optimal flex plays, but we don't get that for Finley, so that gives you a little bit of a signal as to what the floor is like for that guy. Above him is Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner, and then Ryan Finley there. Steelers D, very much in play there as well. Huge turnover potential there against Ryan Finley. They should be able to pin their ears back all game long. That's about as high as I've seen defense grade out for us here all season long here on the captain spot. But that's going to do it for us here this week. Good luck building here for Steelers Bengals. It'll be an ugly game, but hopefully if you approach it the right way, approach that low scoring mindset, we can make some really unique options, really unique lineups. That'll do it. Make sure you go check out cptspot.com. Pick up a copy of the ebook, $34.99. Subscribe to the Captain Spot YouTube channel, youtube.com/thecptspot. You can get my show 3 days a week, all up in your ear on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're getting your podcast. That'll do it for us, guys. Good luck this week. We'll see you on Thursday.